de couper, mais après, de préférence, c'est bien de l'avoir directement, mais t'inquiète pas. Ne mets pas de pression par rapport au temps et tout, ok?
Bien sûr.
Donc, Benjamin,
Yes.
welcome. Welcome to ABORA magazine. I was looking forward to have you as a guest in my platform because when I heard about what you do, when Adrian told me about what you do, I was so keen to meet you. And then you came, and then we met during that evening. It was very interesting to talk to you and to discover the concept of rebuilding and reshaping our society in a more conscious way. What I am curious about, first of all, like our audience, is what is it exactly about?
Alors, first of all, it's not exactly about reshaping our society. And before I get there, thank you for having me here, Mehdi.
My pleasure.
So it's about first reshaping ourselves consciously so that we can reshape our society. Because there is no reshaping our society if we don't change ourselves in the first place. And what I believe in order to do so is education. Because our society is the result of the way we think. It's based on beliefs, it's based on way of thinking. And so when our society needs to change, it's basically our belief and our way of thinking that needs to change as well. And what's the best tool in order to do so is education. And so it's an educational project that is transdisciplinary, which means that we really combine all kinds of disciplines, such as philosophy, psychology, history, environmental science, in order to bring a new knowledge that can change the way we think. And when we change the way we think, again, we change the way we interact with the world, and we also can change society. And so the idea, of course, is to do it consciously. It's to bring consciousness to the picture. Because what I noticed in my journey is that a lot of the issues that we are facing right now in the world are the result of unconscious mechanism. It's not that we are consciously choosing to create these issues for ourselves. It's that we are driven by mechanisms that are unconscious. In order to change these mechanisms, they need to be brought to consciousness.
I disagree with you in this, but we will go to it later, okay?
Absolutely.
I have some questions about it because for me, I agree with you let's say to an extent, but yeah, there is a point where I disagree with you. So I was thinking about we'd start with the beginning because you sent me your presentation, and I wanted to start through that because I think it's the best way to introduce what you do, you know? So you were talking about, you called it the new word together.
Yes.
Can you start by this?
So one of my first realization in my process, in my journey was, so let me precise, in my journey to understand what the heck is happening on the surface of this planet and why it seems that we're heading toward our own demise. And one of the first realizations that I had is that, okay, this is happening because we are fighting one another. We are embedded in these rivalries for power, for resources, for status, etc. And as we are fighting over the turf, we are destroying the garden. And that's the garden that we need for our survival. And so New World Together, the first intention was to really tell people, hey, we need to come together to stop the chaos happening on the surface of the globe, because if we don't do it, it's this chaos that will stop us. And so New World Together was this first intention. At the time, it wasn't yet an educational project.
How did it become that?
So
Thank you for saying
when
that.
I started the journey, I was very naive. I thought that I could just explain how dramatic is the situation on the surface of the globe by bringing statistics and dramatic ecologically, socially, economically, and by explaining that this is happening because we are basically embedded in these rivalries. And by bringing as a solution that we need to unite our forces, we need to come together. And I thought people would just easily buy into it and be supportive. And I realized that actually they were stuck. That it's not that they were coming with a fundamental disagreement about what I was saying, but they just didn't know how to do it. How do we come together? How do we unite on the surface of the globe to face the great challenges of our times? They didn't know. So I started to study where the blockages were coming from. And that's where I started to realize that actually there were psychological blockages, in a sense that people did not believe we could come as one, or were afraid of the idea of us becoming as one, because in their imagination, the first thing that was coming out was negative. Invasion, chaos, new world order. And so I studied why. And what I found was that there was deep-rooted beliefs that were hiding deep-rooted fears that stem from our past experiences that were notably traumatic. And so at that moment, I realized that, okay, if I want this vision of New World Together to become a reality one day, I need to understand and highlight these blockages so that we can unblock them, basically, so that we can untap this, I would say this higher consciousness, this life force that I think wants humanity to be united and living in harmony with nature.
I want to come back to a very important point. You said that you studied all these important topics. I want you to tell people that what you used to do before, what you used to be. Yeah, tell us a little bit about who you used to be before creating this, please.
Yeah, sure. Because so before I did that, I was in the corporate world, and I was having a successful career in a corporation. So when I quitted my job, I was an expert consultant, but I had been a branch manager and a manager, and I had climbed the corporate ladder for about 10 years. And so I had tasted what our society calls success, which is money, power, status, and everything that comes with it. And I quitted because the more I was climbing that corporate ladder, the more it became clear that the system which I was feeding wasn't sustainable. I mean, we were fully focusing on profits and growth, and it was about doing more profits to do more growth, and more growth to do more profits. And although I was doing efforts not to think about it, it was very hard for me to deny the link between the way we were functioning, full on the rat race, and some increasingly alarming scientific reports about ecosystem destruction, climate change, biodiversity loss, or growing inequalities. And so for me, it became a dilemma. I could have chosen to remain on this career and simply suppress, I would say, the code of consciousness that was alive within me. But it was too much cognitive dissonance, I guess. So I picked the code of consciousness. And for me, that was like quitting this life and entering a new life, making a kind of a leap of faith, thinking that, okay, I will be able to do something. I will be able to do something about the situation. And for me, what I really wanted to do was to address the roots of the problem. Because I know that if we want to solve a problem, we need to identify and address its root causes. And so for a long time, it was an exploration to understand what are the roots of our self-destructiveness as a species.
Did you do this by going through yourself, or did you do it by focusing straight on others?
Both.
Okay.
The beginning of the journey was going within myself. So the journey was
That's what I wanted to
ignited with a meditative retreat. So, and interestingly, initially, I had signed up for this meditative retreat as a way to deal with my cognitive dissonance. I mean, I was feeling anxious, depressed, my life didn't make sense. And so I thought, I want inner peace, so I'm going to try this meditative retreat. And as I dive within myself, I started to sense that the solutions I was seeking for were in that direction. So I didn't know what was that direction, but I kept meditating and meditating deeper to have an answer. And ultimately, the answer was the consciousness within. It was tapping into that opened the Pandora box in a way, and that allowed me to find all the other answers. And after that, I used to, of course, I had to also observe the outside world, as probably as much as I was exploring the inner world. And I realized they were actually mirrors of each other's. That what we see on the outside world is a projection of what we have inside of ourselves.
So by wanting to change the world, you started by changing yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Did you already know that you were going to need to go through this first?
No.
Okay.
And it took me by surprise, and it was violent. And yeah, it took me 1 year and a half to actually make it through this process, in a sense, to find a rational ground on the other side. Because at the beginning, it was simply overwhelming mentally and emotionally. And so it took me 1 year and a half to digest and to start to ultimately, I would say, I made it on the other side when I realized that, okay, the issue is a collective psychological issue. And that's what I need to address.
What really bothered you?
What bothered me?
Yeah, what made you wanting to change?
For me was this deep gut feeling confirmed by a lot of data that we're heading toward our own demise. So seeing not only climate change, but biodiversity loss, and seeing like a lot of vital indicators aggravating with the time and connecting the dots with our way of life. So for me, I started to feel in my guts, in my body, that we were heading toward our own self-extinction. And so I think what really pushed me to change is not only thinking it, but feeling it in my guts and in my body.
See, well, the next question is exactly following what you were talking about. It's the first thing that also starts with your presentation is the introspection and conscious change.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by, what do you call introspection and conscious change?
So introspection will be starting to ask ourselves why we are doing the things that we are doing. Notably because a lot of these things that we are doing are obviously creating serious issues. And until now, we've been having a dominant narrative, which is that's human nature. But the first question is actually, why are we doing this? For example, why are we having wars? What are we trying to achieve by that? What's the reason behind our incapacity to live in peace with one another? To a point that we cannot even avoid armed conflict. We've never been able to do so on the surface of the globe. Why is that? And so a simple answer is human nature. Introspection is about getting deeper and realizing that, actually behind these patterns, there are fears. And that these fears, they stem from past experiences that we had. Past traumas. And so it's not human nature. It's wounded human nature. It's a traumatic state.
You think we are wounded?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I can probably explain that. If we look at our history, we've been into survival since the beginning of our existence. And when we are in survival, we don't really have the time to think about our traumas. We're busy surviving. We are busy, we need resources, we need to protect ourselves from aggressors, we need to fit in within a group because by yourself we're not going to survive very long. And so we don't have the time to think about our wounds. But all these experiences, whether they are famines, whether they are colonization, whether they are war, they are deeply traumatic experiences. And we have thousands of years of such experiences that we have accumulated, and they've left wounds, psychological wounds, but we've never addressed them because we've always been in that state. If an analogy I like to give, it's as if the human species was a child that since the beginning of its existence has only known war. of course, such society is heavily traumatized. And now it has kind of it has won the war against nature. Humanity dominates the surface of the globe, but humanity doesn't know how to live in peace because it has never experienced that. It's still driven by the trauma, the fears, and the belief that it has inherited from a journey of tens of thousands of years of hardcore survival. And today we are called to recognize that, because today, for the first time, we have the technological capacity to destroy ourselves, and I will say that we are on a path to do so, but we also have the knowledge and the capacity to realize what we are doing and to change.
To take another path.
And to take another path. And without introspection, we can't do that. And so I also want to say is that the dominant thinking, one thing that needs to change as well, is until now, we've mainly considered our problems as externalities, something to fix out there. Climate change is something to fix out there. Mass extinction is something to fix out there. Social inequalities is something to fix out there. What we haven't recognized that is these are outcomes of the way we function. And the way we function, if we want to change it, is something we need to address in there.
That actually leads us to the next question, which is for me, it was very interesting when I saw this point in your presentation. As a person, already we have a problem when we come back to ourselves. When someone puts us in front of ourselves, we have a problem, which we can call this a denial. And I like this very important point that you touched, which is what would you call the collective denial that we are in right now?
So, what is a culture? We have built a society around myth. And our society is shaped on myth. My country is a myth. I love this saying, which is, reality is what remains when you stop believing in it. If we look at our society, it's not grounded in reality. It's grounded in beliefs. Our nations are grounded in beliefs. Our economy is established on beliefs. Our institutions are also established on beliefs. And we've placed these beliefs above reality. It's understandable because reality has been scary for quite a long time. And so we needed some kind of structure because reality was so complex, so wide. But by hanging so much to this narrative and this myth, we forgot reality. And I'm going to give you a more tangible example. If we look at the surface of the planet, we have the planet by itself. If you look from from space, you will only see a planet and nothing else, no border. But in our psychology, we see a fragmented world, separated by countries. And these countries in our psyche, in our psychology, are much more important than our planet. For example, we have hundreds of millions of men right now ready to die for these countries. We have a tiny fraction of that, if not nothing, to actually take care of the planet. Yet, the planet we share in common is more important than the countries that divide us.
I'm sorry, I will cut you in this. So
Yeah.
you don't think, because it can be interesting for the audience, you don't think that if tomorrow we have like an alien invasion, you don't think that the world would unify and
Of course,
and fight for the...
I'm sure we will.
Okay.
And interestingly, so we will very easily be able to unite our forces to fight an alien invasion. But when it comes to unite our forces to fight our own shadow, to fight our own our own selves, our own self-destructive selves, we are not able to do so, because that's our blind spot, that's our denial. So I probably denial. I was going into another aspect, which is social structures, but it's linked to it because we are very attached to our myth and to our cultures, and sometimes they ask us to forget about reality. I mean, if you look at the same thing, a lot of the stuff that we do, that we're very busy doing, has no ground in reality. Paying bills, etc. I mean, we are playing with numbers, but these numbers are not grounded in reality. Our financial system is not grounded in reality. It's not measuring the resources that we have on the planet. it's a completely artificial number out there. And so basically we are in a state of denial, which is creating a lot of issue. And rather than facing these issues and this state of denial, we entertain ourselves away. We distract ourselves away. We work more, we consume more. All of these are strategies basically to run away from ourselves and to run away from this deeper state of anxiety that we carry from the journey that we've been through. And so the situation is calling us to wake up. It's calling us to become self-conscious as individuals first, but then as communities and as a society.
That's what I wanted to come to. You talked also that it's the time to, through your vision, but I agree in this with you 100%. You said it's time to go to a kind of multi-dimensional reality.
Yeah.
What do you define by this?
So we have to understand the heritage that we come from. Our ancestors had to make sense of a very complex reality with limited knowledge and limited mental capacities, because that's part of our human nature. And so out of uncertainty, we had a need for certainties. So we created dogmas, dogmatic belief. The truth is. Except that the truth is much bigger than we are. And because the truth appears to be infinite. It's not bounded in time or in space. It appears also to be objective, but objective in a sense that it can be looked at from very multiple angles. But we humans, when we are facing the truth, we are coming with relative, limited, and subjective perspectives. And that's overwhelming because we cannot grasp it in its entirety. So our ancestors, because they wanted to have certainties, they took their relative, limited, subjective perspectives, and they saw it as an absolute, objective, infinite truth. And different cultures had different truths. And we build our societies, sometimes our identities on top of it, often actually. And today, we are in a globalized civilization, but we're not sharing the same reality. We are in our fragmented group perspectives, and we can't make sense of our shared reality because we haven't acknowledged it. And we haven't acknowledged that, okay, all the perspectives that we have are relative, subjective, and limited. And if we want to make sense of our shared reality, we need to put our perspective together and remove all the blind spots. And instead of doing so, we are fighting with our respective perspective. There's conflict of perspective all the time. It's as if we all had pieces of the puzzle, but instead of putting the pieces together to try to make sense of the puzzle, we make a competition to know who has the best pieces. And so our collective sense-making space is fragmented, and yet the complex global issues that we are facing are calling us to have proper capabilities for collective sense-making. And so here what I'm speaking about is this need to also take a step back and realize that, hey, we gotta exchange our perspectives to make sense of our shared reality, and that's a collaborative game. But right now we are playing this competitive game to know who is right. Everybody is right on one side and wrong on the other.
That actually takes me to something that I myself wanted to take you to. I wanted you to comment on it. I love Jung. I don't know if you like him. I love the way I prefer him to Freud. For me, Freud is a fraud. But Jung, for me, touched very important topics about our society, and he said something. He said the unconscious mind is generally full of illusions, and it tends to go very deep into idealism. What do you think about that?
So yes, the unconscious mind is full of biases, and simply for the simple reason that if it was conscious, we would not have the biases. We would have identified it and we would have corrected it. So in a way, all our biases are in the unconscious. And of course, different people have different biases. So we are very good at pointing at the biases of others because they are much more easy to spot. They are not conscious of them. But it's much more difficult to point at our own biases. And so one of the reasons for that is, first, because we don't want to face our biases very often because they are deep-rooted, and often because our biases might link with core beliefs. Core beliefs means they are beliefs on top of which we've shaped our identity. And so why we have these core beliefs that are deep-rooted in the unconscious is also to give us a certain, it's providing us a certain way of making sense of reality, to answer the question that we don't know how to answer. For example, if you're a Christian, okay, there's evil in the world because we are of a fallen nature, but Jesus is gonna come back to save us. Okay, no need to think too much anymore. It's simple, you can put it everywhere, it works, right? So these kind of, and if you're Christian, it's an identity as well, and it's your path to enter heaven.
We agree, we're talking about all the religions. Huh?
All religions, all religions.
Not only Christianity.
Not only Christianity, I would say any religion that presents itself as an absolute, superior, infinite truth.
Yeah.
It's like, it's, again, if we understand that, okay, that's a relative, subjective, limited interpretation, we can start to make sense of what actually represents all these things we are talking about. When we speak about Jesus Christ, what are we talking about? Are we talking about Savior? Or are we talking about higher consciousness?
Tell me more, please.
Well, the ancestral interpretation is to see Jesus Christ as a Savior. And it comes with a lot of extreme stories about someone who's born just of a mother, who's walked on water, who has been able to, out of a small meal, feed 15,000 people. It's extraordinary narrative, which we could call irrational. But if we look at what actually the character represents, it represents a connection to God. And God is, if we consider it as something that exists, is the highest possible form of consciousness. It's omniscience, right? So if we don't get too attached to the story, but we look at the symbolic and the meaning of the symbol, realize that, oh, actually what we are trying to find through this character is a connection to God, a connection to higher consciousness. And interestingly, that's where things start to become rational. Because if we think of it, okay, waiting for the Savior to save us from our own unconsciousness and ignorance and greed, that's not very empowering, that's not very rational. But if we think about tapping to our own higher consciousness to save us from that, then we start to have an empowering recipe for success. And then we can also understand, okay, then why we have been so attached to these ideas? Well, for many reasons. It's much easier to wait for a Savior than to take responsibility for ourselves. It's also much easier for systems of power to tell us to wait for a Savior rather than to take responsibility for ourselves.
Is that what you mean when you say consciously harnessing the human power?
No.
Okay, what do you mean?
Yes.
By... Okay.
So here, this is all about what I just said. I put it into integrating the complexity of reality, but seeing that, okay, we have different symbols, but we are all talking about the same thing. Buddha, higher consciousness. Jesus Christ, higher consciousness. No need to argue about the image. Let's look at the deeper thing, right? So that was part of it's also part of tapping into our creative power. That's
why I put them in connection.
Yeah, they are deeply interrelated. Because when we realize that, oh, actually, all these narratives, they have participated in shaping our society. And this narrative, they are the product of our human mind. So if we think of it, our society is the creation of the human mind. And what we have created with our minds, we can change with our minds. And so when I'm speaking about claiming and reclaiming our creative power, I'm talking about realizing that the systems that we have that determine how we should function, what our priorities should be, are systems that have been created by us and our ancestors, and therefore systems that we can transform consciously. Because what we see with these systems right now is they were first created out of needs of survival. So I don't think we really thought about what is going to be the impact of creating these systems on ourselves and on our world. Say, okay, we need resources, let's make an economy, let's make a business. We need to protect ourselves from dangerous neighbors, let's make nations with strong border and an army. We need some way to perpetuate our social norms, let's make institutions. We did that out of needs to survive, but what we didn't see in the process is that these social systems that we created, they shape us back. And if we are not conscious of this creation process where we use our minds to create systems and these systems shape us back, then we just have systems that we create unconsciously and that shape us unconsciously. So the key here is to realize that we are the creator of our systems and to ask ourselves individually and collectively, what are the systems that are going to allow us to become the best version of ourselves and the version of ourselves that we need to be to understand and overcome the great challenges of our times that are existential.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, man. Thank you. You talked about creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes you think, I mean, we know, but I really want to go deep into this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
To have it as a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you think that becoming self-aware collectively will automatically increase our creativity?
Okay, that's a very good question. I've never been asked that question. So I kind of know it intuitively. It makes perfect sense because it's been my experience. But I've never formulated a response to that question. So, because becoming self-aware, it's also transcending some deep-rooted fears that are keeping us disconnected from ourselves. And also limiting beliefs. And by nature, these deep-rooted fears and limiting beliefs, they are chains. They are chains to our being. They are chains that cut us from who we are truly. Very often these chains, these fears, these beliefs, they tell us that we have to follow a certain program. We have to be a certain way. And so when we are following this program in this certain way, we are not truly being ourselves. In fact, we are rejecting ourselves in order to fit in. But when we truly start to be ourselves, there's something unique that comes out. Because my version of being myself is completely different from your version of being yourself. Now, if we are both following the same social programs, we'll probably be very similar. But if we are both truly being authentically ourselves, we are very different beings. And because we are free from all these chains, we are naturally much more creative, much more prone to experience the things that we truly want to experience. And I think also much more prone to become what in our hearts we want to become. And when we follow our hearts, this is where we have the highest forms of creativity. I mean, that's what makes outstanding artists. It's not to follow a certain norm. It's to be able to be connected to their arms and to express truly what they feel on the inside.
You talked about the fact that when we automatically become self-aware, we transcend. So you're talking about transcending something.
Mm-hmm.
what are you talking about exactly when you say transcending? Are you talking in the spiritual aspect?
Yes and no. Probably sometimes I use the word transcending and sometimes I use the word integrating. But to me, it's about breaking free from stuff that has limited us until now and that we don't need anymore. And this stuff is stuff that we've inherited from our past, whether it's our own past, whether it's the past of our ancestors.
So when you talk about transcendence, you're not talking about any spiritual path.
You could call it spiritual, but I'm always mindful about using that word because it can block people uselessly. Because what I'm talking about is about ultimately deconstructing some limiting and false beliefs, releasing some fears that are holding me back to be the best expression of myself, healing some deep-rooted traumas that allow me to reconnect to my true nature, to my sensitivity. And so you can see it within a spiritual lens, but you can as well see it within a psychological lens. And I like to see it from a psychological lens simply because it becomes more rational.
So you are more focused on what is rational, because for you the spiritual word is not really something rational. When you talk about the spiritual word, in any case,
I would not say that, but we say it tends to be misused. And we've come from a long heritage of putting in opposition science and spirituality. And I think as a result, spirituality has been deprived of science, which has resulted in a tendency to be ungrounded and very etheric. And on the other, science has been very mechanical and very materialist.
where someone like Manly P. Hall explained it a little bit, the connection that spirituality has with science. What do you say about this?
For me, spirituality is ultimately knowledge and experience of the self. And so my own experience with you right now is a spiritual experience because I am experiencing myself through you and you're experiencing yourself through me. I just would like these two worlds who've been trapped into this war of binaries to reconcile themselves. Because science, again, that is deprived of spirituality is mechanical and defective. And a spirituality that is deprived of science is ungrounded and defective. And they both need each other, and we both need them to create a balanced world and a balanced society. And so, in a way, I use spirituality very carefully because I want to make sure that I remain very grounded in rationality and logic, because I want people to see that there is no opposing these two worlds. They are deeply interrelated and they truly are complementary to one another. And we need both to work together, and right now they don't.
Okay, now I want to come back to the point where you started talking in the beginning about the fact that our era today is doing things, our humanity today is doing things unconsciously. And the fact that if we were more conscious, maybe we would not fight each other and all. Where I disagree with you, I think that it's a part of human nature to exist in a peaceful way and in a conflict way. I think that it's not something we can change. I'm spiritual, so I believe, and I believe in a higher intelligence. I believe that I was created by, I don't like to call it God or Allah, but I believe that I was created by a superior intelligence. And I believe that we have, and I think that we have it rooted in ourselves. The fact that you have some people who like to do bad, and you have some people who like to do good. Like me and you, I guess you're not a psychopath. When we do good, we are happy. We love it. We actually, me personally, I always wanted to have a lot of money because I wanted to help. It was never about buying boats and villas. And I think you too, because I know you enough to say that. But you have some people who also want to have money to do bad, to have more power, to control more, and to have everything for themselves. Let's not be in a denial. Let's go deep into the society of today. We agree that we live in a system that did everything to own the power. We're talking about the Vatican, we're talking about Saudi, we're talking about Washington. They did everything, or the Crown of England, they did everything to own a power, to own the word, you know what I mean? And I believe that they did it not because they were unconscious, but they were fully conscious of who they were, and they did it because that's exactly what they wanted to do. You know what I mean? Because I mean, when you analyze the history of these empires and these families and those people that shaped, the word and the culture we live in, and we are programmed to, they are not unconscious. For me.
Okay, sure. Do you mind if I start with a question for you?
Oh, yeah.
Could you think of violent conflict in the world right now that could not be solved with higher consciousness at a collective level? And could you tell me why you think it can't be solved?
Oh, well, there is a conflict in the Middle East that's going on, Gaza and Israel.
And you think that a collective higher consciousness means that people will become collective higher consciousness? I'm going to tell you what I put behind it, right? So people become aware of their trauma. They're aware of their interconnectedness. They're aware of their false beliefs as well. They're aware of their fears. They see each other as human beings. They're not into seeing through the veil of their beliefs, like, there is with all these labels. Do you think they will still, if they had access to that, they will still kill each other in the name of their whatever reason they're putting behind it? Because I think
we all know, exactly. We all know the bullshit that is going on. No, personally, I believe that the bad that is being done, and that was done, and that is being done, was done, and is being done fully conscious.
Okay. Well, because
why? Because
so do you think it's higher consciousness who are doing that, or do you think so it's ego, right?
Yeah, well, it's more about psychopathy. We're talking about really about.
But do you think psychopathy is coming from ego, or it's coming from higher consciousness?
None of them.
Okay.
Yeah, none of them. I think it comes from people who just don't have any feelings.
Okay, and how come they don't have any feelings?
Oh, that if we talk in a scientific way, we're talking about a problem in the brain where they don't feel empathy.
Yeah.
That's something.
Why do they have this problem in the brain?
Well, it can be provoked by many things. It can be provoked by an abusive parent in their childhood, or abusive situation. But it always comes from a certain abuse.
Yes.
Trauma.
Yeah, absolutely, from trauma. And so, because to me, that's why I believe we can change that.
Tell me.
Today we have heavily traumatized leaders in running a traumatized society, and we're not aware of it.
I agree, because sorry, I cut you. I will just give you an example. One of them who provoked a big war in Afghanistan, she fed it, Hillary Clinton, she was abused.
Yes. And so if psychopathy was fundamentally human nature, and you had humans who were born psychopaths with no reason, no history of abuse, even when we look at the past generations, transgenerational, we say, okay, well, all we can do with these people is neutralize them so that they are not a danger to themselves and to others. But right now, I don't think we can come up to that conclusion, because the trauma is all over the place. It's a traumatized society that brings to power traumatized people who might look like very sure of themselves and of what they are doing, But if we start scratching the surface, we realize it's full of darkness and full of fear and full of, therefore full of ego, because of course the more there is someone is driven by fear, the more someone is within its ego. And so where I think we have a chance is that if we were collectively conscious of that, we will not place this type of people in power.
So you come back to us.
Of course.
I mean, the people.
Of course.
Yeah,
Of
that's
course.
that's the thing. That's the thing. I think that's why we disagree. But actually, at the end, we agree. Because
Yes.
me, I'm not talking
I'm
about people.
sure. I didn't fundamentally disagree with what you were
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
by the way. I just had
we were talking
nuances
about,
to offer.
Yeah, we were talking about two different things. That's the thing. Me, I'm talking about the elite. I never talked about the people.
Yeah, but the elite is in power because the people are not aware of who they let in power.
Tell me more, please.
What if basically we could diagnose these brain issues that make people being completely disconnected from their psychopathy and recognize that this is dangerous? Collectively, I don't think we would let anyone with such pathology take such a position of responsibility.
What makes you think? Why do we do this? Why did we put those people?
Because for a very long time, there have been the figures that have been reassuring. Because they were those, the psychopaths, they were those who were the most likely to go and hurt the enemy, which was considered a need. There were those who were ruthless about getting resources, which was considered a need because we were in a climate of hostility, a climate of scarcity. It's like if you observe chimps, and I really love this documentary, Chimp Empire, the group of chimp is going to choose the most ruthless alpha male as a leader. Why? Because it provides reassurance to the group. Because they know that if another group of chimp come in their territory, they can count on him to take the lead and go and fight to protect their territory. And we humans have done exactly the same. Why we place someone like Trump in power? Because for a large fair share of people, he's reassuring. Why? Because he brings this toughness that comes from its psychopathy, but at the same time, he's saying the world is dangerous and you need people like me.
Okay. Then,
so it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, I agree. But you tell me about Trump. I tell you, why do you put in a power someone like Macron? I mean, Macron has nothing of a leader.
For the same reason. For the same reason. Because Macron is promising us that we're going to grow the economy, that he has the recipe.
It's not to talk about Macron or something. It's to talk about the
profile.
profile.
About our leader, the profile of our leaders. And I agree, they are not empathic people. I mean, another reason why, because of course it's multifactorial, so I give you one reason. Another reason why is right now, our society is a pyramid. And to go to the top, you got to fight. So our society picks the best fighters. And the best fighters are not the most empathic, wise, caring people. They are the most psychopathic, ruthless, and manipulative people. Our systems select for that because we haven't yet had the collective level of consciousness to create a system that selects for the most conscious, the most empathic, the most wise of us.
Why do you think that we are attracted by this? I mean, we are attracted in a way that we want them to have. Personally, don't you think that that to be able to lead, to be able to have a certain power, you need to do not, we have this tendency to say that, and I agree with it, to do not be too emotional. You know what I mean? To be rational and have a certain squareness, in the way you think. Like a law is a law, a rule is a rule. That's what I mean. Is don't you think we tend to do not put too in a power to people who are too sensitive because we are scared that someone who is sensitive
is not going to get the job done. It's not going to be a good leader. because also so back to our heritage, that's where our past history is very important to acknowledge and to understand. Having been at wars for so long with one another, and still technically at war, probably we are using less weapons and more money and stuff to fight each other, but
more
technologies. But basically, when we are at war with each other, sensibility is considered a weakness. Strength is what? Why? Because to win in a ruthless fight, you have to put your sensibility aside. You have to numb it. Let's say, for example, I'm gonna give you, let's say I'm going on let's take the image of two MMA fighters. Who is going to win? The one who's sensitive and doesn't want to hurt his opponent because it's painful, or the one who's gonna go full on to destroy his opponent, right?
The killer.
And so as long as our society is rooted in rivalries, we will select not for the most sensitive ones, but for the most competitive. And the most competitive are often the most psychopathic.
That's the thing. Why did we reach that level? Why do you think that we don't see any power, we don't see any strength in sensitiveness?
Because we're not yet conscious enough, and because we've never came to the point until now where uncontrolled, unrestricted strength became an existential risk. It has always been a competitive advantage. It's the first time in human history, because of our technological progress, because of the destructive power that we have harvested, that we have to nurture sensibility to survive. Imagine, I love to take this analogy. Imagine lions in the jungle. They catch their prey, they evolve biologically to improve their capability to catch their prey, just as their prey evolve in order to evade the lions, the predators. But if the lions start to get access to exponential technological development, their capability to catch their prey increase exponentially, and if their prey don't get access to that, their capacity increase much slowly, which means that they will be caught much more often, which means the lions will spread rapidly on one side, but they will exhaust their prey on the other, which means that if the lions cannot become conscious to control their primal predator instinct, it's becoming self-destructive. The lions is us. So now we are being called, and I could put it in the sense of looking at it from the sense of the masculine and the feminine, patriarchy. We have a male-dominated society because we have been evolving for now quite some time in society that are ultra competitive, built on strength, that are rivalrous with each other, which is So now we need to wake up the feminine, because basically we need to balance our strength and our destructive power with sensibility, with a more nurturing, collaborative energy. Because an excess of masculine energy and a lack of feminine energy is unsustainable with exponential technological progress and with the destructive power that we have harvested. And so we are being called to find balance between the masculine and the feminine archetype, and I'm not necessarily sexualizing those, because the feminine and the masculine are in each human being. But we need these two archetypes to work in synergy with each other and not to suppress each other. The primal way of functioning, rooted in fear, was with a tendency for the masculine to suppress the feminine, seeing it as a weakness, and for the feminine to manipulate the masculine, seeing it as a way to access power. And this needs to stop. So we need to realize that we need both of these to work together, because we want our strength to be to be driven by sensibility and empathy.
How do we do this?
There's an individual aspect to this question, and there's a collective aspect. I think individually, for example, and I'm going to speak as a man here, it's about learning to reconnect to our sensitivities, accepting that we have emotion, accepting that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's not a weakness. Doesn't mean that it's a vulnerability that needs to be cultivated as an identity, but more something that is part of our nature, because we humans, we evolve in, we are in duality. We have a part of strength and we have a part of weakness, and we have all of that. So recognizing that we are also vulnerable, that feeling is okay, that being afraid is okay, and being at peace with that. For women, it can be also being at ease with their femininity, also being at ease with being more masculine. I think ultimately it's about being at ease with being ourselves with all these facets, and not trying to be only one and repressing the others because we consider it as a weakness or something bad to express. As a society, it's about realizing how important it is to nurture collaboration, sensibility, humility as a collective. So bringing these values in our society means nurturing them rather than being focused on competitiveness and strength and performance only, because if it's only competitiveness, performance, and strength, then we have no resilience. We have something that's very powerful, but ultimately very weak, because it doesn't know how to adapt. It doesn't know how to be soft.
Yeah. And to conclude,
yes,
finally, what solutions do you bring?
Well, there are many solutions, but basically what we want is to empower people and organizations to be part of the solution. We want them to realize that if we want to be part of the solution, we first need to be aware that the problem that we face outside of ourselves are interrelated, and that they stem from issues we need to address inside of ourselves. Once that awareness is accessed, then there is an integration process. So it's doing the inner work, and that can happen by experiences, different practices, so that the change that we want to see can be embodied. And when the change is embodied, the next is how do we come together to popularize it, because ultimately we need to change our systems, and we don't want system change to be imposed by a force, by an authoritarian force. We want it to come by a collective choice, because we know it's better for us, it's better for one another. So these changes need to be popularized so we can change the systems and ultimately regenerate this planet.
Can you give an example? Sorry, I got you.
An example of
changing the system. Let's say, for example, if you thought about it, of course, but the political system, for example, what would be a good political system? Because we need a political system, but not this one. We all know that not this one.
So first, some of the change is like a political system that cultivates transparency and trust, and a political system in which the game that is being played when we face a challenge is collaborative in how to understand it and how to resolve it, rather than competitive into how to use in rather than competitive and being how do I use this problem to take power over others, but more into how can we think together to understand this problem and resolve it, and what kind of solution can we implement. The key ultimately is to realize that we are all the solutions that we've been waiting for.
Can you tell me more about this, please?
If we look at the complex problems that we are facing, whether they are social, ecological, economic, geopolitical, they require many different solutions. So we have to stop looking for the solution that's going to solve the problem. We have to start looking at how do I want to be part of the solution? What can I bring to this? And if we do so, we realize that actually humanity is a collaborative role-playing game in which we'll all have our part to play to make this world a better place for ourselves and one another. And so that's the big shift. It's shifting from this mentality of what's the solution that I want to push on others into a mentality of how do I want to be part of the solution and what am I bringing to the table? And how do I collaborate with others who have different solutions to bring, because all the solutions are ultimately complementary. And so that's a shift of mindset, but that implies major shift in politics. Because in politics, that always been the solution is this. Like, no, that's what you bring to the table. How about you work together with the others? They have something else to bring to the table. And how do you work together to align your solutions, to combine them, so that we can fix these issues together, rather than use them as a tool to take power over each other?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And what we provide to empower people on a tangible place is start with conferences for people to start to better grasp these issues and their underlying causes, and how they can be turned into opportunities for the human species. But also like workshops and more and deeper training programs, which are really there to empower people and organization to be the change that they want, that the world needs to see.
Mm-hmm. And so you already do your workshops already?
Yes, I do already training programs as well, conferences as well.
Where people can find you?
You can find me online on our website, newworldtogether.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn as Benjamin Castillo. And if my message is, if you're truly willing to be part of the solution, there is a way. But you need to believe in yourself, and you need to believe in humanity, because we're gonna have to do it together. So we need to believe in ourselves first, and also in each other. But yes, there's a way. We are facing great challenges, but we can turn them into opportunities for us. And there's beautiful things we can do together.
Amazing, amazing. One last thing, what would you say to the new generations, the 20 years old?
Don't lose hope. First, sorry for what has been done in the past. Forgive forgive your ancestors and your parents. They didn't know any better. Don't be too afraid. We are probably going to go through a rocky journey together, but there's something beautiful that can be made on the other side. So have faith in yourself and have faith in the future, and embrace the journey.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Mehdi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. It was a honor.
Likewise.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun together. We wanted to share this with you, and enjoy.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
And see you on the journey.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Amazing.
Oh, super.